Good morning, everyone, and welcome. With love at the center of all that we do, we are the Unitarian Universalist Church of Buffalo, where we strive to make the world a better place for all while exploring the great mysteries of this journey called life. No matter where you come from, what you look like, whomever you love, how you identify, you are welcome here. My name is Bobby Withrow, and I will be your worship associate this morning, and I'm honored to be helping our wonderful interim minister, the Reverend Cathy Harrington. You know, a service like this takes more than just the two of us up here. It takes the staff, the ushers, the musicians, the tech crew, the choir, the food ministry, and countless others, and a thanks to all for all that they do. We also wish to acknowledge that the ground upon which we meet rests upon the traditional territory of the Seneca Nation, the keepers of the western door of the Haudenosaunee people, original nations of this land, who continue to call for justice and self-determination. We have just a few announcements this morning. First, Nancy Wilkins and Lucy Sloan wish to thank everyone, specifically thank you to the 35 brave, kind, resourceful, generous, and courageous volunteers who made Doug Sherman's memorial reception yesterday beautiful, elegant, and memorable for the 250 people who gathered here to celebrate the life of that man. So thank you to all who came to help. And then, on the evenings of Friday, February 28th and Saturday, March 1st, join the UUCB soloists and the house band for All That Jazz, 2 nights of jazz tunes, banners, socializing, food, and fun. Now, starting today in the parish hall, you can purchase your tickets or sign up to volunteer to help make this music ministry fundraiser for the church's operating budget a success. Also, speaking of fundraising, there are still church Christmas ornaments available for purchase. Let me know if you'd like to buy one. Just so you know, so far we raised about $800, specifically $792 for our church's operating budget just from those ornaments. And then, at noon today in the Alliance Room, Reverend Cathy will be hosting a What Does Love Do Now conversation. So please join us for that just right after the service. And as always, there are other announcements that can be found in the weekly e-blast on the church's website. And then also, on the back page of your order of service, there are some other announcements coming up for events this week. And finally, I'd like to invite Chris Slocum to come up to announce some news from the Board of Trustees.
Good morning. If we haven't had the pleasure to meet, I'm Chris Slocum. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. I'm here to talk briefly about church business. As you know, we had a congregational meeting last Saturday. I'm not going to retell, what? Oh, it was Sunday. What's a calendar? I'm not going to retell the entire meeting. You'll have to hit me up at coffee hour for that, but just a few highlights. So first, if you will join me in thanking Sean Sweet, Thea Hassan, David Batt, and Denise DiPietro for their service to the board. Sean and Thea both finished 3-year terms of service. For one of those years, Sean was vice president. Thea served as treasurer and secretary during her time, and Dave and Denise both stepped up to the plate when the board needed an extra set of hands for some months, and we are very grateful to all of them for their service. The congregation elected Kate Bell-Schwade to an additional year. Thea's term kind of spread across 2 terms, she served 3 years, but it was 2, so Kate's finishing that up. And Susan Mandolce, are you here? Not today. Ken Mernitz, are you here? All right. They were elected as well. So they'll be serving 3-year terms. And then returning to the board is Frank Zanoli, Bill Park, and myself. If you are good at counting, and I suspect you are, you'll notice that 6 people, and we're a board of 7. We're still looking for that 7th person. If you would like to serve our board, which entails a lot of reading the budget, looking at our policy documents, trying to make more of the big picture decisions, Please send an email to board@buffalouu.org, and we can talk more about what that commitment entails. After the congregational meeting, the board met, and the board elected Bill Park as the secretary, Frank Zanoli as the treasurer, Susan Mandolce as the vice president, and I was elected president. I am honored to serve you all in that capacity again. I also wanted to share with you all, I'm feeling very grateful to be part of this community right now. The future is uncertain and not in the normal way. You know, all of the values that we hold are under attack, and I'm grateful to be part of this community. Your support of this community supports those values, supports the people we care about here. If you're looking at the news and you're thinking to yourself, I don't really know what to do, I'm not saying that we do either, but we have each other, and that's a fantastic place to start. So thank you for your support of this beautiful place. And thank you for your support of this wonderful community.
Thank you, Chris. And now, let us build the bonds of community by saying hi to each other. Introduce yourself to someone you don't know. Try and get someone to join the board. Or, if you'd prefer, I've done it, so. Or if you'd prefer, you can also sit quietly in the pews and just wave to people. So.
They're especially animated this morning. They aren't listening. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
I love the sound of that energy and joy this morning. We could use more of that. The opening words that I chose this morning come from Victoria Safford, the Reverend Victoria Safford. There is too much beauty in this world to give up on it yet, and it is always too soon to surrender to cynicism. Bring your doubt, your skepticism, and your downright confusion, even your bitterness. But in the midst of these, in the center, wrap your tender fingers around that bright thread of hope. Feel in your heart that still, steady hunger for something more, the vision we glimpse every day in the rising sun, across the foothills, the light that spreads across the face of the one we love, the look of knowing all there is to know and still loving life, loving us just as we are, just as it is. And so for this hour, we come to celebrate, to praise, and give thanks, to refuse to give up, to steady ourselves, keepers of hope, brave builders of this still possible world. Come, let us worship together.
Each week, Unitarian Universalists around the world gather and light a chalice the symbol of our free faith. Please write it in body and or in spirit as we speak our chalice lighting words as printed in your order of service or on the screen above me. We gather in loving community, inspiring one another to transform ourselves, to create a more just and compassionate world. And now, let us sing hymn number 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People, in the gray hymnal. The words will also be on the screen. We're only going to be singing verses 1 through 4. Verses 1 through 4.
And now it's time for the story for all ages. So for the young at heart and the young, please come forward for the story. It's a really good one this morning, I hope. Good morning. It's good to see you all this morning. So I just wanted a disclaimer. You cannot catch stripes. Just so you know. Here we go. A Bad Case of the Stripes by David Shannon. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla always worried about what other people thought of her. Today, she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. She was always worried about what other people thought of her, and today she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she wanted to impress people. She tried on 42 outfits. I've done that. Anybody else? She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror, and then she screamed. Okay. Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed too. "Oh, my heavens, you're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla had stripes from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. Honey, do you feel all right? I feel fine, but just look at me. You get back in bed this instant. You're not going to school today, her mother said. Oh, Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say about her crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bummel came to examine Camilla. Most extraordinary, he exclaimed. I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable breathing? No, I feel fine, she told him. Well then, turning to Mrs. Cream, I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment which should help clear up the stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me. And off he went. Oh, the next day was a disaster. Everyone laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon, and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. The other kids thought it was great. One yelled out, let's see some purple polka dots. Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted checkerboard, and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you change channels on a TV. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called and said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream. I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla at home. She's too much of a distraction, and I keep getting calls from other parents. They're afraid those stripes might be contagious. Oh, Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart? No, thank you. What she really wanted was a plate of lima beans. Oh, my goodness. Well, yes, let me see. Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day, I better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over. An hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. This is Dr. Crop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young. And then the specialists went to work on Camilla. They squeezed, jabbed, tapped, and tested. It was very uncomfortable. Well, it's not the mumps, included Dr. Crop, or the measles, said Dr. Sponge. Definitely not chicken pox, put in Dr. Cricket, or sunburn, said Dr. Young. Try these, said the specialists. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. Take one of each before bedtime, said Dr. Crop. And then they filed out the door, followed by Dr. Bumble. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. And when she woke up the next morning, she felt different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit. She looked in the mirror, and there staring back at her was a giant multicolored pill with her face on it. Okay, Dr. Bumble comes rushing back, and the specialist, instead of specialists, he brought experts. Dr. Gord and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. She was poked and prodded and looked at and listened to. The expert wrote down lots of numbers. They huddled and whispered. Dr. Gord said, it might be a virus, he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. Or some form of bacteria, said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be a fungus, added Dr. Gord. And instantly, Camilla was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camilla and then each other, and they said, we need to go over these numbers again back at the lab. They didn't have a clue, much less a cure. And so by now the TV news had found out about Camilla, and reporters from every channel were outside of her house, telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. And soon the crowd was camped out on the front lawn. Okay, next slide. The creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, and an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail. Nothing worked. And one day, a woman who called herself an experimental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and become one with your room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camilla groaned, and slowly she started melting into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose a dresser, and the two paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. "Oh, what are we going to do?" cried Mrs. Cream. "It's just getting worse and worse." She began to sob. And at that moment, Mr. Cream heard a little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. "Excuse me," she said brightly. "I think I can help." She went into Camilla's room and looked around. "My goodness," she said with a shake of her head. "What we have here is a bad case of the stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen." And she pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. "Here, these might do the trick." "Are those magic beans?" said Camilla. "Oh, my, no," replied the old woman. "There's no such thing as magic beans. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you'd like some, wouldn't you?" she asked Camilla. And Camilla wanted a big heaping plate full of lima beans more than anything, but she didn't want to admit it. "Yuck," she said. "Nobody likes lima beans, especially me." "Oh dear," said the old woman. "I guess I was wrong about you." And she put the beans back in her bag and started for the door. As Camilla watched the old woman walk away, she thought, "Oh, those beans would taste so good." And being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she's been going through. She just couldn't stand it. She said, wait. The truth is, I really love lima beans." I thought so," said the old woman, smiling. And she popped a handful of beans into Camilla's mouth. "Mmm," said Camilla. And suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. The room swirled around, and then it stopped. There stood Camilla. Everything was back to normal. "I'm cured," she shouted. "Yes, I knew the real you was in there somewhere." She patted Camilla on the head and went outside and vanished into the crowd. And that's the story. What do you think? What was your favorite part? No comment. All right, well, my favorite part. Hi, you have a favorite part?
I'm going to tell you I had this before, but in my videos.
Oh, you've seen this book before. Oh, wow. Okay, I had never seen it. So I think that the moral of the story, first of all, don't make fun of your friends, even if they do things that you don't like, because we have to be welcoming and inclusive. And that's what this story is about. Poor Camilla was trying to be somebody that she's not, and that's not good. So if you don't want a case of the stripes, be who you are. Okay? All right. Thank you for listening, everybody, and I'll sing you to your classes.
Each week, we take a good portion of our Sunday morning offering and give it away to a deserving social justice cause outside of our church walls. This month, we are supporting and highlighting the good work of the Foundry. Megan McNally, their executive director, will be joining us next week to share more about her organization. The Foundry is an active, community-based makerspace committed to hosting after-school arts, STEM, entrepreneurship sessions, and workforce development opportunities for young adults, providing hands-on classes for adults, and supporting local entrepreneurs in developing maker-based businesses. To donate, you can go to our website and click on the donate button. From there, you can select if you want to donate to the church or to the Foundry, and you can drop some money in the offering plate, send in a check, or arrange for an automatic contribution from your checking account. No matter how you choose, know that the money helps us and our partners to live out our missions to help those in our community. Let this morning's offering be taken up with humility to support this good work.
I get so down in trouble. Sadness, fear, and dread. The world I took for granted was crashing to the ground. And I realized I might not live long enough to ever see it turn around. Oh, but then I got to thinking of the ones who came before, of all the sacrifices that they made to open up so many doors. Doors I got to walk through on streets paved for me by people who were working on a world they never got to see. Now we're working on a world that we never see. I'm joining forces with the warriors aloud who came before and will follow you and me. I get up in the morning knowing I'm privileged just to be working on a world
Jane Armbruster and I got to see Iris DeMent here in Buffalo just a few months ago, and decided that we needed to have that song in service. Thank you so much, Taryn. So now in the center of our service and in the center of our lives, let us pause to honor the silences of the world. Let us open our hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain, and the soft, gentle coming of love. One of my colleagues and seminary friends wrote this poem yesterday. It's called Thank You for Our Fears by Tess Baumberger. Love that liberates us all. Today I thank you for our fears. For what we fear is the destruction of what we value, justice and equitable treatment of all, pluralism and affirmations of the interdependence, care for the earth, generosity of heart, and transformation of our spirits and our world. Thank you that we are afraid, because it shows us what we value. If the cost of safety is forsaking our values, may we continue to be afraid. May we lean into our fears and show up for our values despite them. May we take comfort in one another. May we take time to rest, to laugh, to dance. May we find beauty in the troubled world. And may we feel and live the love which liberates us all. May it be so. Amen. So we do hold, especially in our hearts today, all who are frightened, worried, and feeling some despair, which may be all of us as well. Please extend that compassion to yourself. I have a joy to share. Today, Marion Reslow said, is Nancy Wilkins' birthday. Happy birthday, Nancy. Oh my gosh, Nancy is a fierce warrior of the spirit, lifting the spirit. Yesterday was a beautiful day. Thank you, Nancy. So now let us fill this sacred space with the names of loved ones and friends and others who we hold close this morning in our hearts, some suffering in sorrow, some celebrating in joy. The breath of nature is upon us, the spirit of life is within us, and the community of love surrounds us. So be it, blessed be, and let the church say, Amen.
There is wailing the whole
This morning's reading is entitled The Happy Accident by Carrie Johnson. The tale I'm about to tell is based on a true story. It is a tale woven from the stories of those who remember. It is a tale of wayward travels, a tale of the stranded tourist. Some of the people who recounted the events described it as a happy accident. The story begins in early October, during the peak of the leaf peeping season, when a couple, Hugh and Betsy, found themselves stranded in the middle of Maine. Just a few weeks earlier, Hugh and Betsy had departed their home state of Colorado, confident with their itinerary and with the safety and comfort of traveling across the country in their motorhome. They were enjoying a leisurely journey to their destination, the maritime provinces of Canada. And then, unfortunate circumstances, their motorhome breaking down in central Maine along the turnpike. To add to the seemingly ill-fated accident, the parts to repair this home on wheels would not only need to be specially ordered, but also specially manufactured because the replacement for their rusted-out gas tank was no longer available. Thus, Hugh and Betsy would need to take up residence in the capital city of Augusta for an unknown period of time. So together, making the best of their situation, Hugh and Betsy unhitched the Jeep they were towing and called for their abiding companion, the family pet, a canine traveler, to join them in the car. After finding a motel and settling into their new temporary residence, this faithful Christian couple picked up the local newspaper in search of a church to attend the following day. One might expect they would choose a familiar faith community to worship, but not these adventurous travelers. They scoured the paper in search of a church that had an 11 a.m. service, a simple criterion for the stranded tourists who were seeking a spiritual community to rest their weary souls. The service title, Heterosexuals Coming Out. Although it may not have been intriguing, had nothing to do with their decision to attend or not to attend. It was quite simple. The Unitarian Universalist Community Church was the only gig in town with an 11 a.m. service. And so, they arrived at the inn, if you will. They entered the sanctuary, received an order of service, and joined the in-gathering of members in the pews. The tourists, strangers now among many, settled into their place with the same assuredness that had them traveling thousands of miles away from home. Now, during the welcoming portion of the service, they bravely stood up and introduced themselves as guests traveling through from Colorado. And as the welcome continued, the couple heard the open invitation to attend the elder luncheon being served following the service. They heard the speaker offer a gentle encouragement for all people to self-select their status as an elder. It is here that we, the members and friends of UUCC, became more deeply engaged in the happy accident. The couple came to elder lunch, picked a seat among a smaller group of strangers, and waited to be served a meal. As they enjoyed their meal of a salad, soup, and dessert, the couple quietly told their story to a table of 6. Mildred recalls how happy and friendly the couple was despite such an unfortunate event. She recalls them being nice people who enjoyed their lunch. She remembers how they seemed so content and happy they were to be with us. The following week, still stranded in Augusta, Hugh and Betsy arrived back at church. They took up their now familiar seats in the sanctuary and quiet contemplated the 11 a.m. service. No longer strangers in our midst, a few knowing members greeted them and called them by name. And then again on October 24th, they joined the congregation now as regulars in the pews. They settled quietly into what had now become their usual spot for the leave-taking service. Ironically, This would also be the week they took leave of Augusta and the Unitarian Universalist Community Church. In early November, Hugh and Betsy finally returned to Colorado, taking with them a memory of Unitarian Universalists in Augusta. They returned in their Jeep to Colorado, leaving behind their motorhome. Yes, it was still awaiting that newly manufactured gas tank, and a memory of the time when the two stranded tourists found a warm hearth, a welcoming faith community, in the exchange of simple gifts. When I spoke with Hugh this past Wednesday, he kindly reported how much he enjoyed his time in our community. He shared with me that his cross-country trip was about seeing the country with his wife Betsy before he began cancer treatment. And as one might expect, he was approaching chemotherapy with as much optimism as a broken motorhome in Maine. Hugh said one of their treasured memories was their time with us. They so cherished the open philosophies, the rich diversity of people, the hospitality of many. He sends greeting to the congregation with the added comment, "Tell the congregation they have a very special gift they are receiving." May this tale of the happy accident be a vision for radical hospitality in this community. May the accidental tourists and the local seekers and those searching for sanctuary from their suffering find companionship in the journey on the corner of Winthrop and Summer Streets.
More words from Victoria Safford. Our mission is to plant ourselves at the gates of hope, not the prudent gates of optimism, which are somewhat narrower, nor the stalwart, boring gates of common sense, nor the strident gates of self-righteousness, which creak on shrill and angry hinges, nor the cheerful, flimsy garden gate of everything's gonna be all right, but a different, sometimes lonely place of truth-telling about your own soul, first of all, and its condition. The place of resistance and defiance from which you see the world both as it is and as it could be, and as it will be. The place from which you glimpse not only the struggle, but joy in the struggle. And we stand there beckoning and calling, telling people what we're seeing and asking them what they see. Last week I talked about Walter Brueggemann's, who identified two competing narratives, the totalizing narrative of empire, which is always about force and predation, and the narrative of neighborhood. He described the economy of neighborhood as a counter-narrative that disrupts the imperial narrative and focuses on individual people in daily crisis, naming and valuing and empowering persons who have been discarded, reduced, or summarized by the empire. Brueggemann warns us to recognize that the two narratives, empire and neighborhood, cannot be at peace with one another. So, what would you do if I said, don't think of an elephant? Don't you dare think of an elephant. Some of you know about the book, George Lakoff's book, titled Don't Think of an Elephant. He's a linguist whose field of study is cognitive science and linguistics. In other words, he studies how the mind creates meaning. And he's talking about the center of our national political discourse is metaphorical, with family values at the center. Conservative family values are strict and apply via metaphorical thought to the nation. Good versus evil, authority, the use of force, toughness, discipline, individual versus social responsibility, tough love. Hence, social programs are immoral because they violate discipline and individual responsibility. Guns and the military show force and discipline. Man is above nature, hence no serious environmentalism. The market is the ultimate financial authority requiring market discipline. And foreign policy strengthens the use of force. In fundamentalist religion, the Bible is the ultimate authority, hence no gay marriage. Such values are at the heart of radical conservative. Right now, folks, I'm sorry to say that the strict father morality narrative has taken over our government. So we have to stop ignoring the metaphorical and moral frameworks that they are inserting into the dialogue in our nation. In his book, Moral Politics, he identifies the two worldviews with the different questions. Our nation is a family. We have founding fathers. He explains that in America, the two families are very different. The strict father family and the nurturing parent family. And so what the strict father family is sort of what's been promoted by James Dobson, who wrote Dare to Discipline. He said, never hit a child under 15 months. However, some conservatives, Lakoff said, don't mind if it's younger. You need a strict father to protect the family. Mommy can't do it, Lakoff says. It can't be a same-sex family. You need a strict father to support the family. Mommy can't do it. And kids are born bad, meaning they only want to do what feels good. Remember the words feel-good liberalism that they planted into the narrative. Kids don't know right from wrong and have to be taught right from wrong. And the only way to do this is to punish them. And it has to hurt. It needs to be physical so that they will never want to do that again. Dobson says, then you can grow up and go out into the free market, the authority, and use that discipline as fiscal discipline to become prosperous. And if you aren't prosperous, that means you aren't disciplined. So you deserve the poverty. That's the narrative. The father is the decider. Have you ever heard that word before? There's no moral authority above the father. So anyway, Lakoff uses Barack Obama's Father's Day speech to define the nurturing parent family. In the nurturing parent family, you start with empathy. You empathize with your child. You are responsible for yourself and for your child. And you have to teach your child to be empathetic and to be responsible toward others so that they can also nurture others. You must have an ethic of excellence. You must become a better person to raise a child and guide them to be the best person they can become. And Obama argues that the basis of democracy is empathy. So government has two moral missions, protection and empowerment, not just police and military, but worker protection, environmental protection, healthcare, pension protection, and more. Example of empowerment is everything that was in Obama's stimulus plan: public works, schools, roads, education, healthcare, on and on. We pay taxes to live in a country that is not a third world country, but has protection and empowerment for all people, not just people with privilege. So many of Trump's earlier actions closely align with Project 2025's plans. Robert Reich wrote, probably last night, he's flooding the zone with so many outrageous and often illegal initiatives that people are overwhelmed, demoralized, and just plain freaked out. He writes, as one woman said, it's an effing nightmare. Yes, it is. But unless you are a judge, there's nothing you can do about it but protect the vulnerable among us. He goes on to say, an effing nightmare is not all that bad if it awakens America. And he reminds us that this has happened before in the early 20th century. Muckraking journalists revealed the giant monopolies, corruption, and public harms of the robber barons. And for that pale national exposure, we wouldn't have gotten the reforms of the progressive era. And so here we are. Don't think of an elephant. Reframing is social change, Lakoff says. Reframing is the way we change the way the public sees the world. It changes what counts as common sense. Lakoff says, when you hear a word, it's a frame or a collection of frames, and it is activated in your brain. We need a new language to create new frames. Thinking differently requires speaking differently. When you are arguing against the other side, don't use their language. And he uses that exercise, don't think of an elephant, with his classroom, just to help them understand. Here's an example. George W. Bush introduced the phrase tax relief, which is now used all the time. Relief implies affliction. So the one who eliminates the affliction becomes the hero. Taxes as affliction become the national narrative, and the conservatives become the saviors when they cut taxes for the rich. Metaphors have immense power to shape our political perception. The New York Times headline framed Trump's actions as physical strength and dominance, ignoring threats to the Constitution and the democracy. This short piece explores how language reinforces authoritarian negatives and calls for framing that defends democratic values. The Happy Accident is a true story of a congregation who welcomed Hugh and Betsy into their midst, and the reframing was simply living their values, offering warm hospitality, and the nurturant narrative of neighborhood. Framing is about getting the language that fits your worldview. Language carries those ideas and evokes those ideas. And Lakoff suggests that we tell stories. Reframe by choosing a frame that exemplifies your values. He says if you yell, if you get upset, if you lose it, you lose the argument. Remain respectful and calm. Listen, don't negate, reframe. And once your frame is accepted into the discourse, then everything that you say becomes common sense. So here's another story about a way that one person was able to reframe the narrative in a neighborhood. There was a time when Dan Stevenson would survey the median at the end of 11th Avenue in his Oakland neighborhood and see nothing but trash. No dumping signs were covered with graffiti. Mattresses and box springs were stacked on tops of bags of garbage. There was a dump, and it got tiring. He reasoned that maybe the neighborhood just needed a little divine intervention. So he and his wife enlisted the services of a small concrete Buddha statue. He installed it on the median and beneath a sprawling olive tree. And just in case anybody got any ideas, he anchored the Buddha with $35 in epoxy and rebar, which I don't know what is. My wife and I thought we might be able to change the direction of the energy. What they were doing was changing the narrative. We're not Buddhists, they said. We just like the little garden guy. And when he installed the statue in 1999, the Buddha slowly endeared itself to the neighborhood. People began to leave incense and candles and flowers and offerings. People showed up to pray at the shrine. And then something else unusual happened. There was no garbage now. There was no graffiti. The people began to respect the area. To the neighbors, the little shrine became a gathering spot, and people would meet in front of the statue to talk. Others would clean the area, change the flowers, spruce up the median. No one ever touches the Buddha. No one removes anything. He is always there like an oasis. A little later, someone installed a wooden structure around the Buddha with a concrete slab for people to pray. Soon the city got a complaint. Of course they did. Stevenson said an inspector from Oakland Public Works Department showed up to inspect the median. He said we were going to have to move it. And if we can't find the people who put it in and everything to move the parts, then they would just come in and jackhammer it out. Before the city could jackhammer Buddha into the afterlife, neighbors kicked up a fuss. They banded together, sent loads of emails to the councilwoman, and they said, oh, it's a safety issue, which is that people who came to pray to the Buddha were in the street because of where it was located. But their councilwoman insists that there are no plans to tear out the Buddha just yet. They were just investigating the complaint. My feeling is maybe if there's some downsides to it, we could work with the community and figure out a solution, she said. Stevenson said he's amazed at how much power a tiny Buddha can yield. Cleaned up the corner, brought neighbors together, and is now taking on City Hall. Isn't that wonderful? I just didn't realize how big he was, Stevenson said, because to me, he's just a little guy sitting over there changing the energy. So I just want to share one last story. It's a very short one about how you can change the narrative. And you have to be clever and think on your feet. How can I change the narrative? In the book On the Res, Ian Fraser tells a story about South Dakota's Pine Ridge Reservation. In the fall of 1988, the Pine Ridge girls basketball team played an away game in Lead, South Dakota. And it was one of those times when the host gym was dense with anti-Indian hostility. Lead fans waved food stamps, yelled fake Indian war cries and epithets like squaw and gut eater. Usually, the Pine Ridge girls made their entrances according to height, led by the tallest. When they hesitated to face the hostile crowd, a 14-year-old freshman named Sue Ann offered to go first. She surprised her teammates and silenced the crowd by performing the Lakota Shaw's dance and then singing in Lakota, graceful and modest and show-offy all at the same time. In Fraser's words, she managed to reverse the crowd's hostility until they even cheered and applauded. And of course, Pine Ridge went on to win the game. This is an example of what Seamus Haney calls the meeting point of hope and history, where what has happened is met by what we can make of it. As Victoria Safford says, we must plant ourselves at the gate of hope wherever we find it. We can't do this alone, but we can do it together. Every day offers us invitations for reframing the narrative, resisting and resilience, and choosing how we will respond. So join me upstairs at noon. Get a snack first. I'm sure Nate's cooking. Let's join our hearts and minds and share ideas for how we might change the narrative here, right where we are, and explore creative ways to live our UU values out loud. Please rise, embody your spirit, and join me in singing hymn number 169, We Shall Overcome.
So
Please join me in speaking our words to extinguish our chalice. As we extinguish the flame of this chalice, may we carry its light with us into the world in the power of peace, faith, justice, and love.
These words are from the Reverend Dr. David Breeden. Let us be the welcome we crave. Open hearts, arms outstretched, radical welcome, unquestioning love. Let us be the welcome we crave, deeply hearing voices and hearts. Let us be the welcome we crave, enriching understanding. Let us embody the community we crave together. Go in peace, go in love, and blessed be.